Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and we finally get to test out the Mage Tower on the PTR. However, by the time you watch this video, the Mage Tower might be gone from the testing servers, as they only wanted to have it available for 24 hours. So I spent majority of today doing the Mage Tower on a variety of different classes and specs, trying out some of the different fights because there's 7 separate challenges in the Mage Tower. There's also a pretty big change to the rule set as to how we'll be doing this Mage Tower, what items, spells, and abilities are allowed inside of the tower, like certain legendaries and even soulbinds and covenants are completely disabled, and we got to experience how that changes the gameplay in a variety of different ways. In today's video, I just want to go over some of the different experiences we had as first impressions, note some of the differences between how we used to do the Mage Tower back in Legion and what's changed so far. Are the fights any more difficult? Are they easier? Are certain mechanics gone? Or are certain mechanics harder because we lost certain parts of our class toolkit from previous expansions? But before that, most of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed. You watch these videos anyway, and if you're interested in 9.1 and 9.2 updates, you might as well subscribe, hit the bell as well. So let's go over some of the different rules, because the Mage Tower and how we'll be interacting with it is a little bit different this time around. Back in Legion, we were stocked up with a lot of borrowed powers. We had 2 legendaries, we had a variety of different trinkets, tier sets from a variety of different raids, as well as artifact weapons with passives and 1 powerful active ability. In Shadowlands, we have Covenant abilities, Conduits, Soulbinds, all this other stuff, as well as legendaries, and most likely we'll get the second legendary in patch 9.2. And I would imagine all these extra bard powers and whatever else we're going to get in 10.0, which hopefully there'll be less bard powers going forward, having to balance the Mage Tower around all these things would be a nightmare. So something had to be done differently. I say this because Blizzard made the controversial decision to disable all bard powers. And they might change this in the future and reverse this, but right now this is what we got so far. All Covenant abilities disabled. All Covenant signature abilities like Soul Shape, Dora Shadows, Fleshcraft disabled. All Shadowlands legendary effects also disabled. Conduits gone. Soulbinds are dead. Shards of Domination not available. Legendary from WoW also inactive. Shot Touch gems from Mists of Pandaria, boy, I actually forgot about those, also disabled. This is done to make things easier to balance, but also it's to make the Mage Tower challenging. And at least so far, the current PTR version is definitely challenging when you don't have double legendaries that give you some crazy survivability for your character. So this is definitely quite a bit of a change in content, but I think this is a good change. You guys let me know in the comments if you agree with this or not, or if they should go back and let us use all these borrowed toys that we get to play with every single expansion. But I imagine this would just be so much easier to balance going forward. And hopefully in the future we'll just have less bard powers and just more evolved classes. Another thing about this challenge is everything is scaled when it comes to your gear. Our item level is going to be scaled down to the highest of item level 50, so a bunch of the different pieces of your character, the items you wear, are going to be down to item level 50. Which means that a freshly geared alt will actually have enough gear, because of the scaling, to dive into a lot of these challenges and give it a try, as long as you know the mechanics. And for many of you that like playing around with gear and certain trinkets and items from previous expansions, and you want to try it for time walking because of this scaling, you might be able to take some advantage with some of these specific effects. I'm pretty sure players will find cheesy items like certain pieces with multiple gem slots that scale properly inside of the time walking that might give players a little bit of an edge. However, I could see Blizzard also disabling all those items and maybe even certain items with extra sockets and even certain trinkets because they're way too busted for this, because the whole point of the Mage Tower is to be a challenge like it was back then. However, let's get into some of the actual fights in the order that I got to try them out. Starting off, I had to go with my main character, my rogue, and try some of the different challenges for rogues in order to see if they have changed any or if they're more difficult or easier. Starting off with my main spec of Outlaw Rogue, we got the Imp Mother challenge, which has a lot of imps that she summons, and it's a very cleave heavy fight. It is fantastic for any AoE class, but I don't really know how Fire Mage is going to fare because Fire Mage has changed quite a bit since then. But for the Outlaw Rogue with Mark for Death and Blade Flurry available, you have a lot of cleave capability with a little bit of survivability, as you can dodge the massive green boulders falling from the back of the room. If you're able to be nimble and quick on your feet, this challenge is exactly how it was back then. It's a little bit tough, but it's not completely punishing. It's a fair challenge as long as you're able to deal with the adds, rotate your defenses, land your interrupts, and control the adds as they come out from the back of the room, the front of the room, as they're teleporting everywhere. If you can handle them, then you can handle this challenge, and we were able to get the rogue outfit for it very quickly. The next challenge is the God Queen's Fury, where you fight Sigrun as well as 2 extra adds, one with a Bladestorm Enrage mechanic and the other with a lot of casting. And if you could dodge all the different Valkyrie that will fly across the screen, if you're able to land your blinds, land your kidney shots, and have overall control while spreading dots on everybody, you might be able to do this, but I actually found this one to be quite difficult. At the time of Legion, this was one of the easier challenges for rogues, and majority of rogues went and did the assassination challenge first because it was a lot easier to pick up than subtlety and then outlaw. And for me, I found the assassination challenge actually quite difficult. I felt like the damage was a lot higher, so I had to really watch out for my character and really kind of kite enemies around in circles, and maybe that is how you're supposed to do the fight. But that one, I totally feel like if I did it a couple more times and I had a limited amount of time to test this because I needed to test as many classes and characters as I could, with a little bit more time, I feel like I could totally do it. It's a bit of a battle of attrition type of fight where you're trying to land the crowd control when enemies use certain abilities, and as long as you control the enemies around you while doing sustained damage, you should be able to do them pretty easily. Closing the Eye, which was the Xylem challenge, was actually quite enjoyable. I did this together on an Arms Warrior as well as a Frost Death Knight. For the Frost Death Knight, the first part I found quite difficult because Xylem will hit you with frost bolts, which do quite a bit of damage. But then he will leave you in a blizzard with a bunch of icicles, and if you touch them, you die. So you have to get through them very, very quickly. And for a class as immobile as a Death Knight, that part was pretty difficult. Then he does this blink away mechanic, which is a Death Knight, as immobile as they are. That was a toughie. However, on a Warrior, I was actually surprised. The mobility was amazing for all the different movement that the boss does, but the defensiveness, spell reflect, ignore pain, I felt like I was invincible, and together with the improved Victory Rush, I mean, it was really, really easy. But for the P2 of the fight, when the massive void monstrosity is out, I felt like my damage on the Arms Warrior was just nowhere near as good. I had a couple good pulls, but I felt like I wasn't getting him anywhere close. On the Frost Death Knight, however, I felt my damage was fantastic, but I did miss one of the adds because I didn't have the grip available, and he gotta get past me. If those adds ever reach the boss, they heal him, and at that point, if one of them heals the boss, it's over. You have to restart the fight. Overall, very enjoyable fight. I feel like it was very punishing for the Frost Death Knight, but any class like Survival Hunter, Subtlety Rogue, Demon Hunter, all of this with Arms Warrior as well, are so mobile. They have a very, very easy time with that challenge. The Frost Death Knight was a little bit tougher. The fight for Fell Totem's Fall is a little bit different than everybody else. For that fight, instead of having an item level 50 of scaling, you have an item level of 45. So all the classes of Windwalker, Beastmaster Hunter, Destro Warlock, and Disc Priest all actually have slightly less item level for this fight, which could be a bug, or maybe it's on purpose, because I feel like out of all those fights back in Legion, that one was the easiest. Disc Priests, Destro Warlocks, as well as Beastmaster Hunters and Moonwalkers were some of the first few classes I remember seeing in Legion that got their challenge mode weapons really early, while other classes had to do a couple more pulls and they struggled far often. So maybe this is on purpose, the scaling, or maybe it's just a bug. Either way, this fight was quite challenging, even on Beastmaster Hunter, but especially on Destro Warlock, since you're not really a mobile class with a billion interrupts. This was one of those fights where you kind of have to do it for a very long while. It's a battle of attrition, and you have to outlast the enemy. It's not about slaying them very quickly, but it's rather just continuing to play the mechanics and just outwhittling your foe over time. Maybe it feels this way because of the bug with the item level scaling, that it's not supposed to scale that low, because the fight does seem like it lasts for a really long time, and classes have been able to do it, but it's been one of the more challenging ones out of the classes I've seen so far. But you know, even if this was bugged, and if everybody scaled lower than supposed to for this fight, and even if the boss does seem like they just kind of one-shot you as soon as you mess up one mechanic, and it seems like very punishing, it still felt like it was doable. Like, I feel like if you have the patience and if you have the focus to do all the mechanics properly, I feel like this is still a very, very doable fight. Then we have the High Lord's Return, which is the tank challenge for all the different tank specs in the game. This one has a lot of movement, there's a lot of debuffs, a lot of ad management, and you have to play around the orbs that Valen drops for you to stun the boss as well as ads around you, as well as there's also a lot of knockbacks left and right. I've already seen a bunch of druids together with the Fel Werebearer form, which is something that players are going to be able to get as a guardian druid in patch 9.1.5 once the Mage Tower is available. I found myself having a bit of a harder time with High Lord's Return, but also I've had the least amount of experience with it. I remember doing this on a Protection Warrior back in Legion, I think 2 or 3 pulls it took me, and then the boss just kind of fell over and died. But also we had a lot of catch-up gear back then, so it was a lot easier by then. This one does seem like a fairly tuned fight though in terms of the actual scaling, as long as you're watching out for the stacks versus the first boss that you have to fight, and you're managing the ads by the time the second boss arrives, and then you're able to watch your positionals and not get knocked off the platform for the second boss. I think it's totally a doable fight, and with some practice, I definitely feel like I could have been able to do it. Then we have End of the Horizon Threat. This one is the healing challenge for everybody but Disc Priest, because Disc Priest actually get to do the Fel Totem's Fall challenge. And for the healing fight, this is the one I've had the least experience with. I, back in Legion, could never get past the first part, and this one has a multiple different areas and phases for this kind of challenge. For Holy Paladins, Holy Priests, Mystery Monks, Rested Druids, and Restoration Shamans. You kind of have to heal in this party with the pseudo tank character, as well as a rogue and a hunter style character, and all these are NPCs that have kind of minds of their own, crowd control of their own, and you have to find a way to keep them alive while also being able to deal with all these enemies attacking them. So you're babysitting these 3 ads, and it's very, very hectic. A lot is going on, and you have to be, I feel like, very precise to get this one down. I was trying this out on a Holy Paladin. I felt like this would have been easier since Paladins are known for damage, but since you can't play Venthyr, you were lacking on damage very highly. So I had to really play some of the out-of-the-box talents that I don't think I've ever touched as a Paladin in a very long while. But I found it refreshing that I tried actually something different instead of just the normal Glimmer build or the normal Crusader build. I really enjoyed this one, and I think it's going to be one of my harder challenges to do, but I really want to try it on a multiple characters, because I feel like this one is all about learning the dance and learning when to use certain abilities and cooldowns at the right time. So if I can learn that dance, then I'll have a much easier time with it, and I felt like this one was, while challenging, a very doable challenge, at least the first part of it. Then we have Thwarting the Twins, which is the Twins challenge where you have to fight these 2 twins. One of them is a melee character who'll run after you. He'll start slow and he'll speed up over time, so you'll need to learn how to kite him pretty quickly. Then when he drops low enough in health, you're able to DPS the second twin as he summons these waves and waves of enemies, as well as these hands that need to be DPS as well. And it just turns into a very hectic fight where you're kiting the world, running in circles, trying to keep everything off of you while also trying to contribute meaningful damage, and you have to do it like multiple times over. However, certain classes have abilities that can let them bypass it. These worked back in Legion, and players were able to use them even today. And it's kind of funny. I wonder if those will stay when Legion Mage Tower comes out. Like when one of the twins goes to try to heal themselves, if you use a knockback ability or an AoE fear, you can knock them out of their heal. You still won't be able to target them, but if you have enough AoE abilities that will hit them, you can actually kill one of the twins off early, and then the fight becomes a little bit easier because you kind of get to skip the phase 2 and phase 3 of the twin running at you. Overall, this was a very interesting experience. I felt like all the fights were difficult, especially if you didn't really know how to deal with different parts. So overall, with my experience with the Mage Tower challenge, for the most part, I didn't really feel like any of the fights were unfair and impossible. Maybe those where you had to do the Fel Totem fight for monks, Beast Mastery Hunters, Destro Warlocks, and Disc Priests, maybe there were some issues with scaling there. But outside of that, all the rest of the fights felt pretty fair. It felt like if you don't really know how to use the class properly or don't know the strategy for the fight, then you're going to have a much harder time. But once you figure out the rotation of cooldowns, once you figure out the crowd control to use at a right timing, once you figure out these boss fights and the different timings for some of their abilities and mechanics, it is so much easier to get through. Because of the scaling, gear won't really matter here too much, so it really comes down to the strategy and knowing some of the different abilities and interactions that your class has with some of these boss fights, and how to maximize the value, how not to move the boss maybe a little too early, how to manage all your cooldowns appropriately, saving your mobility and maybe saving certain procs until a later portion of the fight. All that stuff is going to be very important when it comes to learning these boss fights, and I'm going to have a lot of fun relearning them all over again. This seems like a very fun challenge, and I had a blast with it, and hopefully you guys will too once it's released, whatever the final version of this fight is going to look like, but the one we got to test in PTR was fantastic. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in the next video.